Okay, continuing to look at the Order of Melchizedek and look at the function that relates to the four faces of God, or the four living creatures, gives aspects of lion, ox, eagle, man, king, oracle, legislator, priest. Romans 8:19, for the anxious longing of creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. That revelation will carry the four faces of God. Creation will respond to the lion, the ox, the eagle, and the man, and the areas of government that they function in. And verse 21 says that creation itself will also be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Now, the glory is the essence of something, and the essence of your glory is the lion, ox, eagle, man, which represents the governmental side of God's kingdom. You're also made in his likeness to represent his character and his nature, which is love. So the government must come out of the character and the nature, so it must come out of love. If we try and operate governmentally without love, then we will do it according to the wrong tree. We will do it out of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, rather than the tree of life. So it's your glory that creation will respond to become free. So that means that we need to know who we are, for who we are to be fully expressed and fully respondable to. Because creation is looking, longing, waiting, looking for you, looking for me, looking for the sons. So the heavenly tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, from the New Covenant perspective, is strongly linked with the Order of Melchizedek. And we therefore need to access the Holy of Holies like the high priest, and we can come because Jesus has made the way. His blood is on the mercy seat perpetually. So my experiences was a journey of discovering what the ark was, and the name of the ark and the function of the ark. So you have the ark as in ARK, but ARC is an arc between two things that forms a connection. So you have electricity that arcs. You get wires put close together. You get a spark or an arc between the two. And between the wings of the cherubim, it created an arc. And within that arc was the manifest presence of the four faces of God. So I began to engage the ark initially about what was the function. I didn't see the four faces of God because I wasn't in a place to be able to see them. I was more intent of what was in the ark, because the ark had three things in it. So when we engage the ark, we come and we stand to engage in. Now, if you think in one sense, one way of looking at this would be that one of the covering cherubim left his post. So there's a vacancy for us to come and stand to look into the intimate things of God. And what they did was to receive the revelation of what was between that ark, the presence of God, and then their wings would release the glory of that outwards. And Lucifer, when he was standing there, had 9 stones that covered his body to reflect the light of God's glory out into creation. And those 9 stones were representations of the 9 firestones of God that it says in Ezekiel, where he was walking in amongst the firestones in the garden of God. And so the light and the revelation of those firestones, he was the light bearer to release out through the 9 stones out. Now, of course, the high priest breastplate has 12 stones, not 9. So think of the 9 is a perfect number, and 9 always adds up to 9 when you multiply it. So 9 times 2 equals 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 times 3, 27. 2 plus 7 is 9. So 9 is a number of completion. God is complete in himself. 3 of Father, 3 Son, 3 Spirit. 3 attributes that carry government in themselves, but together form 9. But in fullness of government within creation, God has established 12. And you'll find that 12 foundation stones for the New Jerusalem, 12 gates, the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles, everything was 12. So in the fullness of government, God has, with his 9, added our 3. So the 3 stones of man, body, soul, and spirit, made in the image of God, form the fullness of government. And so when we stand here, we are to receive the light of the revelation that then through us is supposed to be revealed out into creation, because now we have access to stand there. So the covering cherub looked into the deep things of God to release the holy, holy, holy of his full character and nature. Now, each of those beings, and there are 4 cherubim, each had 4 faces, which means there are 16 dimensions to the revelation of God's nature. Now, we tend to see one, and then we look at another one, or maybe look at another one, but there are 16 dimensions of the revelation of the nature of God that are there for us to engage with and experience. Each of those 4 beings had 6 wings and 4 hands. Each, therefore, 24 dimensions of revelation, with 96 dimensions in total. So you can see that we have a lot to mature into, and there is a lot of revelation that is there for us to discover when we look into the 4 faces of God. It isn't just 4 faces, there are dimensions of revelation that God and God's government applies to. We tend to think of it generally 3-dimensionally, because we live in a 3-dimensional world, with time being the 4th dimension. But from God's perspective, there's multiple dimensions. But as sons, we also have responsibility to engage those dimensions. There's something called sacred geometry, which is where different mathematical shapes, which are formed from a sacred perspective, represent certain things in the dimensions of God's kingdom. One of them is called the Tree of Life. Another one's called Metatron's Cube. And they are representative of different spheres that represent different connection points of government. And we are positioned in here as sons to form government in the dimensions. Now, obviously, we need government in ourselves first, but I'm just showing you that there's way more when it comes to the Order of Melchizedek than just the simple things that we're doing from heaven into the earth. There are other responsibilities that we have as light beings, of beings of light. Once enlightened to the reality of these dimensions, we have positions where we are within the fabric of creation as light beings. Each of us was created a spiritual being which is made of light, and that is creative light. God created the light that we have in the sun and the moon and the stars. It's created, and it's limited to the speed of created light. But creative light functions at a much higher speed, because the closer you approach pure light, who is God, the faster the speed of light is, and therefore time has a different dimension. And therefore, when you engage fully in the light of God, you're outside of time and space. Therefore, you're where there is no time, it's all now. So our positions within creation are marked by Metatron's cube, and they have all these different shapes, which are representations of different perspectives of God's government. Now, I know it sounds complicated, but when you begin to engage yourself and look into the reality of the presence of God in the Holy of Holies, you will find that revelation of where this relates to you will be released. And you don't really need revelation of what it releases to anybody else, but you do need to know where you are positioned within the government of God within creation, because you have responsibility within different aspects of creation which are not just for this world. So there's more, basically. So as I matured, I went from associating with the ark for daily mandates to engage the heart of God, to engaging the four faces, and then stepping into the name of God to engage the eternal heart of God outside of time and space. Now this was a progression. I couldn't have done that back in 2010. I had to go through the process of engaging the dark cloud, of separating soul and spirit, of reintegrating. I had to go through many engagements with fire and the seraphim on the altar, in the temple, for purification and refining, to renew my mind, to deconstruct my thinking, to bring me into a place where my consciousness was expanded so I could engage these things. You won't just do it just because you think it's a good idea. There's a process of maturity that you go through. This process mirrored knowing my identity and governmental position and being transformed. The more I knew about myself and the more I knew about who God was, the more I realized how I could outwork that in kingdom government and authority. So my first focus was what was in the ark. So from 2010 to 2012, I would go before the Holy of Holies, I would engage the ark, and my desire was to engage into what was within the ark. And initially, that was the pot of manna, the tablets of stone, and the rod that budded. So I would go and I would ask for a mandate for my day. So I would ask, what do you want me, what's your will for my life today? And I would symbolically see eating the manna was taking on the resources and the sustenance to fulfill the will of God for my life that day. And Jesus said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. And he said to his disciples, look, I have food that you know not of. And one of the ladies said, I'm not seeing you eating much physical food. And I am, but in reality, I have all the resources of heaven available to me to enable me to do the will of God for my life. I have heavenly resource. I will never run out of energy in speaking to you. I could speak to you for hours and hours on end. You would run out of energy in listening to me. One of the longest sessions I've done in questioning and answers was 4 hours and 26 minutes of solid answering questions until people ran out of questions to answer. I could have carried on going for days. See, Paul spoke all night. Where did that revelation come from? Out of his revelation that he was receiving out of heaven. Out of the heavenly revelation that he received when he went into the wilderness and spent time engaging with the presence of God. He received the revelation that he was able to impart. See, when we know how to receive the sustenance of heaven, there is nothing you can't do. I have the energy and the ability to do everything God's calling me to do, whatever that is. And my expectation is that I will have that. Seek first the kingdom and everything gets added. So I see it as when I engage the will of God for my life on a daily basis, I receive with it all that I need to enable me to fulfill it. Now I also engage with the tablets of stone, but now things aren't written on the tablets of stone, are they? In the new covenant, things are written on our hearts and our minds. So when I engaged with the ark, I was looking to engage with the heart of God so that my heart's desires would be aligned to his desires, and then during my day, I would be drawn towards that which was his desire. And I would recognize his fingerprints on things around me, if you like, that would draw me to them. So I would get some specific revelation of the things that God wanted me to do on a daily basis, but I would also get the general revelation of God's heart. So let's say God's heart was to heal blind people, okay? And I received that heart, then I could then heal blind people. But how I did the healing of blind people would be creatively at work through my sonship, which is exactly what happened with Jesus. See, when Jesus knew what the Father was doing, knew the Father's heart, then each day he administrated that on earth creatively through his sonship. which is why he didn't do it in a formulaic way. He didn't heal blind people the same way. He did it differently. Sometimes he made mud. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he touched. You see, that's so that we don't get into the formulas of there's only one way to do it. You choose to do it in the way that relates to who you are. You are creative as a son. See, God didn't give Jesus a list of instructions every day and said, right, you're going to heal 10 blind people today. You're going to do it one with mud. You're going to do it one with this way. You're going to do... He said, his heart was, blind people can be healed. Jesus healed them the way he wanted. To express that we do it differently in that way. So you can receive his heart by engaging the ark of the presence of God and know his heart and outwork his heart creatively every day. You don't need to have a detailed list of instructions all the time. That is the safety net. Well, I want to know what to do. Mostly because you don't want to get it wrong out of fear of getting it wrong, because of out of fear of what God will do if you get it wrong. So a lot of that is a wrong mindset and a view of God. God wants you to know his heart. Then there's Aaron's rod that budded. So there's life that's going to come out of what God has given you to do every day. And authority that you have to deliver it. Because the symbol of the rod was the symbol of authority. Now, in the kingdom, that's a scepter. A scepter of authority, which is held in the right hand, which is the right hand of authority, because our left hand is holding the right hand of Jesus, who's empowering us with his authority to rule with the scepter. Because we're connected, we're not ruling independently. So I used to engage the ark of the presence of God every day. And then when my soul and spirit was separated, and I was living in the realms of heaven all the time and not stepping in and stepping out every day, I learned I could stay there. And that's when I saw the four faces of God revolving between the wings of the cherubim. And the first time I saw it, I was like, whoa, what is this? And as it was moving around, I was drawn to the eagle. Because my primary function is legislation. So I was always drawn to the eagle. And the eagle soars and sees a bigger picture, which is how I want to see how things fit into the bigger picture of God and his kingdom. So I was always drawn to the eagle. But as I continued to look at the four faces every day, then I was drawn to the lion. And I was drawn to the government of the authority, and then I was drawn to the ox. And I avoided the man face because I associated the man face with ministry that I didn't see was me. Now I was wrong, but I was seeing it with the wrong mindset. Now what I should have been drawn to the man face first, because that's the priestly function that enables you to see the intimacy of the heart of God and engage eternity, and enables you to step into the four faces, because that's your position as a priest within the four faces. But because I was avoiding that, I was only looking at these things, not stepping into them. So I was getting revelation like the eagle, or I could see from some of the perspective of the eagle or the ox or the lion, but I wasn't stepping into it until I eventually engaged the priest face. And then it was like, I wish I'd engaged this first. Because as soon as I started gazing on the priest face, all of a sudden I was drawn to step into the four faces. That was my position. But I was looking at the external position of ministry, functioning outwardly, rather than being inwardly positioned within the heart of God. So eventually, I then stepped into the four faces of God and realized that that position gave access to the ancient pathways that could walk you back into eternity, into the eternal now. So you have these biblical numerology, two forms an ark of agreement. That's why Jesus said, when two agree on earth about things established in heaven, they will be done. So agreement, unity is important, so important. We can't operate independently. Two come into agreement, and that agreement opens up a portal, which is what the two archangel wings, cherubim wings of agreement, open up revelation. Then you have three, which equals government. Father, Son, and Spirit, governmentally positioned in total unity and relationship of heart, mind, and purpose. And when we start to form heavenly government, the Beit Din, or the bench of three, which represents heavenly government on earth in the foundation, it will be a representation, a manifestation of God's kingdom on earth, but it's to be done without there being any senior leader. The senior leader is an earthly position, not a heavenly one. There is no senior leader in Father, Son, and Spirit. Jesus prefers him to the Father, and the Spirit prefers, but that goes round and round and round. Because then the Father sends the Spirit to direct people to Jesus, who would direct people to the Father. There is no competition. There is no I am boss. Now, Jesus, from an earthly perspective, recognized the authority of only doing what the Father did as a representation for us to know that we have access to the Father's heart, that we can know the Father's heart. He wasn't saying that I am less than the Father. And the Father, he said the Father's greater than I, but from an earthly perspective, while he was on earth. But from a heavenly perspective, he was always still spiritually part of the Godhead. Even though he chose to come as the Son of Man, he was still the Son of God. And he functioned in that. So three is government, but it must be mutually submitted, unified government without one person in charge. If you have one person in charge, you will default to a human perspective of government, which is two people supporting the one people, which was the Moses order, where two people supported Moses' arms. That's human. In the heavenly government, there are three people with their arms up together. That's how it operates. Then you have four, opens a window or a doorway for manifestation. So you have God as three, and when we come into agreement with God in government as the fourth, it opens a window for that government to be manifested. That's why we must be connected to God in this governmental way. So 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, which is a governmental bench. 3 + 1 = 4, which is God and man in agreement. That opens a window. 3 × 3 is 9, which is the complete number of the fullness of God. The 9 stones covering the cherub's light bearer's body. Then there are 12 stones on the high priest's breastplate. 9 + 3 = 12. Heavenly government and earthly government in fullness of agreement. That is what we're looking for. We're looking for heaven and earth to be in full agreement in our lives and in what we do corporately, so we can see heaven manifested on earth. So you have the government of heaven, and then you have the government of earth, the reflection. Because it's a mirror, remember? Looking into the things of God as a mirror to reflect it, not to copy it. Man copies, mirror reflects. So when earthly and heavenly government overlap, you get this picture or symbol, which is one of the symbols of the Metatron's cube, in which you have within the midst an opening or a portal or an opening for manifestation. Now this is also known as the Merkabah, the chariot of God, or that which gives us access to the energy that's in heaven to manifest it on earth. Limitless resources and energy can be manifested when earthly and heavenly government come together. And Jesus manifested that energy while he was on earth. He created things from nothing, which it wasn't nothing, it was just from what isn't seen. Because everything we see physically came from that which was not seen visibly. But all the particles of the universe respond to the voice of heaven's and earthly government and begin to align to form things. So Jesus formed a coin in a fish's mouth by choosing to create that by his words as an oracle, and the whole of creation and the particles that can't be seen formed the coin. Now you can learn to do this. You can learn to be creative. Jesus spoke and things formed. Creation responds when we speak in earthly and heavenly government together. So another picture of this in a more complicated way, which shows all of the governmental of it, is this picture of the Merkabah. Now, you can activate those gates and you can draw out of the heavenly realm into this physical realm limitless energy and resources, because the treasury room of heaven is open. Now, you can look at that and you'll find that New Age people have copied a lot of this and are putting other things around it, but in reality, we have dimensional gateways that we can access. But they happen when heaven and earth are in agreement, for heaven and earth to open this portal. So we have access up into the realms of heaven, we have access down under the earth. We have access to be a reflection of heaven into the earth, so we can go in and out, to and fro. We can go in and out of these realms, we can go to and fro across the earth. So you can be translated across the earth in time and space. It's like, hey, it's fun. It's like I've been translated to different countries around the world to minister to people. Because people are praying, asking God to help. Now, in some places, there's no one physical to go and help. God can send an angel to be a messenger to help. We're also messengers. So we can go and help. And when you're available to God, when you know your identity and your position, where you are in the realms of heaven, and when you are in Him, in the eternal now, then you can be anywhere, because He's omnipresent. So you can be anywhere He is, which means everywhere. And He's omniscient, so you can have everything you need to know to enable you to do anything you need to do. And He's omnipotent, so you can have everything you need in power to enable you to do it when you're in Him. When you're outside of Him, you've got none of that. All you've got is your own resources. So we need to have the limitless resources of being within His government, heaven and earth in alignment, in Him. So at times, I make myself available to God, particularly in times of worship when I can just chill with God. And I'm available. And I find that my spirit can be translated to different parts of the world. I've gone to China, and I've met a couple with a baby in China, and I ministered to the baby, and the baby was healed. Now, just as an angel, which is a spiritual being, can manifest physically,